So now we're going to taste through the 2006 Garden Series. We're going to start with what I believe to be the most elegant wines, moving really up to the most powerful wines. And the way I structure the tasting is to go from what I believe is red fruit, through purple fruit, through to black fruit. And we have a dark sheep of the family called Sophie's Garden, and it's easily the weirdest wine in the lineup, so I always pour that one last because it's so different to any of the others. The first wine is from Heathcote, which is 2 hours north of Melbourne, based on what I thought to be some of the oldest soils in the world, Cumbrian soil. It's about a 15-year-old vineyard at the top of a hill on a beautiful slope. What we find here is that Max's is what I would term the most European wine that we make. It is not generous with huge, lush, sweet fruit. It's more of a leaner palate and more finer tannins. Aromatically, it is cool climate on the nose, and then very, very succulent tannins, but not a powerhouse, where once we move into the other wines of the tasting, that's exactly what you'll see. Max is my 5-year-old son. The label is orange because of the orange Cumbrian soil in Heathcote. The next wine is Samantha's Garden, named after my wife Samantha. It's from the Clare Valley. The gold label is due to the fact that the wheat fields in South Australia, or when you drive from my hometown of Adelaide up there. What we find here with the Samanthas is that Clare is an amazing region. It's very, very warm days, but very, very cool nights. There are 7 geographic valleys within the Clare, so it really should be Clare Valleys. All the fruit for this wine comes from Watervale, and all of a sudden we see here a more of a lifted bouquet, moving much up into what I would say red or purple. But what I absolutely love about Clare is the absolute elegance that it maintains through the palate of absolute beautiful red cherry, moving up into, not even into a plum, it stays very red focused with lovely tannins. Then we're off to Langhorne Creek. Langhorne Creek is interesting. It's called Langhorne Creek, but it's actually based on a river called the Bremer River. It has an alluvial floodplain, and these vines are right on the edge of the Bremer, and it has a huge inland lake called Lake Alexandrina, which is where I spent most of my summers as a kid, sailing boats and having a lot of fun. What we find here in Langhorne is we always find a eucalypt nose, and then a very, very muddy texture across the palate, and a real plummy fruit, always mulberry plums, and a lovely persistence of a very fine tannin. Really juicy wine, really fleshy, juicy, very generous, worlds apart from the first wine, and I think once we're moving into South Australia, that's what we see that South Australia does best. Lily's Garden is named after my 7-year-old daughter. McLaren Vale is close to the ocean, has a huge maritime influence, hence the wine is blue. And what we find here is McLaren Vale has a low diurnal range in that it has warm days and warm nights. It's the region that we pick earliest, always the first fruit to come in, and we source from a number of different vineyards in McLaren Vale. Classic McLaren Vale to me is always coffee chocolate mocha with a very slight note of peppermint. My frustration with McLaren Vale comes with the palate, where it can be so rich and filling and so luscious that a lot of time the richness of the mid palate overpowers the structure of the wine. It's very much a definitive style. It's not like any other Shiraz made in Australia. I like it very much, but it is mostly the most powerful wine in the lineup today. One thing I'd like to talk about is the oak handling here. The most amount of new oak that any of the wine sees is 15%. We use predominantly French oak in all of the wines except a very small percent of American oak in the lilies, and the Samantha sees no new oak at all. Moving up to the Barossa Valley, to Bella's Garden. Bella is my business partner's 5.5-year-old daughter. It is red because our best vines are planted in what's known as granitic red-brown earth. It's a bright red soil. Why Barossa is so famous is it has this amazing ability to start out quite big in the mouth and then roll into just such beautiful, persistent, elegant fruit tannin. And what I always love about the Barossa is that when you finish tasting it, it just sits on the palate, and it's never a hard wine to drink. It just always sits and just so focused and so persistent. It really is one of the great wines of the world. Wow, that's got some length on it. Then 06 Sophie's Garden from Pathaway. Pathaway is a bit, I always see it as a contradiction of a wine. When you smell Sophie's, which is named after my business partner's wife Sophie, is green because it's where all the forest industry is in South Australia. What we find here with Sophie's is that we get what I always term a very cool climate nose. It's very peppery, spicy, quite lifted. It's almost Rhone-like in its aromatic profile. But then what you find on the palate is you find the tannin starts incredibly early. There's so much tannin in Baffle Bay. I always liken it to Cabernet-like tannins, but the fruit is black fruit. So you smell the wine, you're thinking red fruit. You taste the wine, it's licorice drap, it's black currant, it's really dark fruits, and then you have this amazing tannin, which really you don't see in any of the other wines. And I think it really just typifies how individualistic Shiraz can be from all these great regions within Australia.